Hello, welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name's James Copley, and today I'm joined by my former university lecturer and all-round Northeast sports journalism legend, Ian Murtagh. How's that for an introduction, Ian?
I'm glad I gave you that teller, James.
How's things all right?
Everything's good. Everything is good. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Well, we'll move straight on to the Burnley game, Ian. I thought it was a disappointing performance, particularly in the second half. I found it funny in a sense that we go back to the West Ham game and Sunderland were very good against West Ham, particularly in the first half. Sorry, particularly in the second half. But in the first half, it could have feasibly been 2 or 3-1 to West Ham. They weren't clinical. And then in the second half, Sunderland really sort of upped their game. I actually thought it was a similar story, but in reverse against Burnley. There was a couple of chances for Eliza Mayenda, which he really needs to be doing better with. And Talby, who was perhaps a little bit unlucky not to find the target. You don't take those. And then in the second half, Burnley up the game, Sunderland's levels drop, and all of a sudden it's 2-0. And it's a reminder, isn't it, that the Premier League is so clinical.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of points I'm going to make there, James. The big question is, is it just a case of the balloon bursting, or has momentum stalled? Let's not forget, Sunderland went into that game on the back of 3 of the greatest wins, well, in their modern history. That's fact. I didn't think a win was a gimme. I thought all 3 results were possible. I would have said the least likely result was a Sunderland defeat, simply because of the feel-good factor engulfing the club, the confidence injection that the players will have had. So yes, it is very, very disappointing result. Let's make no mistake about it. I thought Sunderland could quite possibly get 9 points in the first 3 games. Now, is that Murtagh's optimism valve going through the roof? A reality check, but yeah, it was a disappointing result, no question about it.
And I think as well, Ian, Lebris loves consistency. He talks a lot about connections all over the fields, doesn't he? But in the 2 games, Sunderland have actually had 3 different centre-back pairings, obviously through no fault of their own, but it's been a bit of a nightmare in a sense, obviously, that you had the injury to Sealed in the first game, but that sort of turned out well, didn't it? Because Alderweireld came on and changed the game. But then you've got a different centre-back pairing starting against Burnley, Alderweireld and Ballard. Ballard, who was a defender I think we all rate really highly, would probably be playing in the Premier League before now had he not had his injuries for Sunderland. Suddenly he gets that groin injury, and Sunderland never really recovered after that, in my opinion.
Well, that's right. I mean, last week, people were wondering why have Sunderland brought yet another centre-half, although Mukiele is a utility player. I think we've got to accept that there is a big question mark, fueled by what happened on Saturday, about Ballard's overall fitness. Everyone would love a fully fit Ballard to play 30 to 38 Premier League games this season, but it might not happen. We're still awaiting news on the groin injury, which forced him off so early on at Turf Moor. But you're right. It's not ideal to have had, after 2 games, so many central defensive partnerships, because I would guess out of every combination in the side, the one Lebris would want to see settled is, to use an old-fashioned term, the numbers 5 and 6, the 2 centre halves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's necessarily any slight on Jensen Sealed either. He obviously came to the club a couple of seasons ago now. He broke into the team actually as a right back. He came very young. I think he only played, 16 times his first season. As I say, a lot of those games at fullback, and then he got a really, really bad injury. He came back towards the end of last season. I think he just got 1 appearance off the bench. He's still very young. I actually quite like him in terms of his physical attributes. I think, I think he passes the ball quite well, but he just lacks that real experience, doesn't he? And it is when you think about it and you think about his career journey, it's a big ask for him to be playing Premier League football at the moment.
Yeah. Can I use Jensen Sealed to emphasize a wider point?
Of course you can.
I've heard on podcasts, message boards, social media, etc., he and Sunderland largely didn't do a lot wrong on Saturday. Now, didn't do a lot wrong is a term I heard from Kieran McKenna in the first half of last season. Didn't do a lot wrong is what Rob Edwards used to say, looking back on Luton's relegation. Didn't do a lot wrong is not good enough for the Premier League. The Premier League is a brutal environment, but it's also an elite environment. You don't stay up by not doing a lot wrong. You stay up by heroic deeds, by technical excellence, by ruthless decisions by a manager. Now, going back to Jensen Sealed, and this sounds incredibly harsh, and it's not meant to be. To be a good championship player, you've got to be a very, very good footballer. I suspect that that's where his natural environment will be. Sunderland need elite performances, they need outstanding displays, they need courage and abundance. Not doing a lot wrong will not suffice.
I would actually challenge that not doing a lot wrong statement as well, Ian, because I think he was probably at fault for the first goal. We're not here to slate that, of course we're not, and we are describing his career trajectory and perhaps why he's not a Premier League centre back at the moment. But I would argue for the first goal he was at fault, and
that's why I said that's why
you have to call a spade a spade.
I didn't say didn't do anything wrong.
No, that's true. That's very true. The devil's in the detail.
People can play magnificently for 89 and 90 minutes and make one mistake.
Indeed, but obviously you want to be going to Burnley when you're Sunderland and you want to win because they're a relegation rival. They've come up with you. It's an early point in the season. It would have been great to continue that momentum, that feeling from the West Ham game. But I don't feel like this is terminal, Ian. I feel like Le Bruce will know what to do. There's plenty of opportunities. It's obviously hugely disappointing. Now, I was really disappointed with that performance in the second half. It did feel flat. Sunderland sort of looked like they ran out of ideas a little bit. Obviously got hit on the break. But I do feel that there's enough in this squad to potentially stay up, with the transfer market still open as well for another 6 days.
Yeah, listen, I think the initial point you made was spot on. It was very similar to West Ham in that the first goal ultimately proved so crucial, and the team that conceded it never looked like coming back after conceding that first goal. What we've got more material to throw into this algorithm. Imagine if that West Ham game hadn't taken place and this 2-0 defeat on Saturday was the first game of the season. Let's just think about what conclusions we'd have drawn. A lot of people across the country, most people across the country would have said Sunderland are going straight back down. Even some Sunderland fans would have thought that. But what it has done is made everyone realise just how hard it is to pick up away points in the Premier League. I mean, let's get this straight. People will say, if you can't pick up a point at Burnley, who I don't think won at Turf Moor 2 seasons ago until December, where can you pick up a point? Now let's compare that to Sunderland fans' mood on Friday, or those heading to Lancashire on Saturday morning. There was still that feel-good factor, and that feel-good factor is still there, but that air of confidence that lasted the full week after the tremendous occasion, the tremendous performance against West Ham. What we've got to do, of course, is throw the two of those together and try and make sense of it. Now, the easiest conclusion, and it's probably fairly accurate, is that if Sunderland are to stay up or indeed flourish in the top flight, the Stadium of Light form is going to determine that. We would have said that before the season started. But again, I do think it goes back to what you were saying about conceding the first goal. There's been a lot of criticism about Sunderland's measured football, meant more as a negative than a positive, i.e. too pedestrian, too predictable, just too safe. and Sunderland played largely in front of Burnley. Admittedly, Burnley had a low block, especially in the second half. What I think we all were delighted to see in the West Ham game was just how much pace is in that Sunderland side. I mean, the three forwards were far too quick for the Hammers, and that ultimately told. Now, it's very, very difficult to use pace when all you're attacking is space until you run into that claret and blue wall, and that's what they did. So there's two alternatives. Do Sunderland defend deeply, concede possession, which is very, very difficult against a side like Burnley, and then try and spring attacks, or do they try and introduce a little bit of guile into the side faced with that wall? You know, Lefebvre in central midfield maybe is a future option because he's certainly got it. I understand Xhaka didn't have one of his better games, but he's a master of the forward pass as a midfielder. So, yes, there are a lot of lessons to learn, but I think the main one is don't concede first.
Yeah, indeed. It is interesting, that sort of juxtaposition.
Yeah.
It is that juxtaposition you mentioned of, you know, Sunderland being really, really good on the break, but when a team has the ball, they do struggle to break them down, and it does go slow, it does go pedestrian. What's interesting to me, Ian, and I would like to get your thoughts on this, have Burnley sort of provided the blueprint of how to play against Sunderland? I would say probably yes, but will other teams in the Premier League follow that? Because to me, there's only really Burnley and maybe it's Leeds at the Stadium of Light that would allow Sunderland to have quite a lot of the ball. I feel like the onus is going to be on every other team in the Premier League to come and do a number on Sunderland. However, as the season goes on, points start to become a premium, managers are fighting to keep the jobs. They might look at that Burnley game and they might change the way they play against Sunderland altogether.
There are many ways to skin a cat, and there's many ways to beat a black cat. Listen, there are so many outstanding teams in the Premier League that I would suggest to you that, you know, the teams at the top of the table will look at Sunderland and that they'll say we can beat them by being better than by, let's be brutal, outclassing them, outplaying them. And that will be the case in certain games, you know, as was the case for Leeds at the Emirates Stadium on Saturday evening. But yes, I think you've certainly got half a point there. You know, Sunderland won against West Ham, as I said, because instead of building attacks, they sprung attacks. Now, what they did the opposite. And after conceding on Saturday, they tried to build attacks and they couldn't. And yes, you want to maybe spring attacks and exploit the pace you have in your own side, but Burnley didn't let Sunderland do that. You know, to win it, you've got to master a lot of arts. Pace is one, but as I mentioned, guile, being able to split open a defence is another. And yeah, the next time they play away from home probably won't be a game like that. No two games are alike after all. But Sunderland, they just have to learn to be very good at a lot of things.
Yeah, that'll be the message with from Lebris on the. You just need to be better at everything against Brentford.
Well, I mean, yes, and let's be fair. I think didn't within 5 minutes of his press conference after West Ham started, I think he actually said that we have to be lessons, we have to improve. I think that is his mantra. You know, you put to bed the last game and you keep improving.
It's interesting, isn't it, Ian, how narratives shift from week to week. Obviously, we're well aware of that. You've been doing this job a long, long time. We were all delighted to beat West Ham 3-0 at the Stadium of Light. It was definitely a big result, a cathartic result. But then they go and get beaten 5-1 or 5-0 by Chelsea.
Yeah.
It's great. Graham Potter's under pressure. Now suddenly everyone's saying, well, West Ham are no good despite them having been in the Premier League since, I think, 2011, 2012 season, something like that. It's just funny isn't it, how the sands shift from week to week to week.
Absolutely. I mean, did the Friday night debacle, from West Ham perspective, against Chelsea, did that ever so slightly tarnish the 3-0 win last week? Because let's face it, we were all saying West Ham weren't very good, but in the back of your mind, you wondered, Well, was that the case of Sunderland not making them very good? But
Yeah.
I think we now know that West Ham side at this stage is not very good and will be struggling this season.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move on to the Huddersfield Town game, obviously coming tomorrow in the Carabao Cup. I think Sunderland are going to field a fairly strong side for this year. We could list off some players that are in need of minutes. Dan Neil, Patrick Roberts, who I actually thought did quite well when he came on against Burnley. There's a chance we'll see new players, Arthur Masuaku, the lad from PSG as well. So it's an interesting fixture. And I think Sunderland haven't taken the Cups very seriously over the past couple of seasons. But this is one, given the level of the side we're going to be able to field, I would hope that they'll have it within them to dispatch League One opposition. I know it's never that simple in the Carabao Cup, but I'd like to see a lot of these players stake their claim, essentially.
Listen, I think what's going to be fascinating is at 6:45 when the team sheets come out. I don't think any of us really have a clue. Now, I think the simple conclusion we're drawing, or the simple assumption rather, is that lads like Dan Neil, as you mentioned, Patrick Roberts, will be given the chance to play. What we don't know is just how much Reggie Labrie wants a cup run. A lot of Premier League newcomers just say, this is a distraction. And of course, managers will never admit they want to crash out, but they're relieved when they do. We don't really know the case here. Now, I think a lot of Sunderland fans want a cup run this year because they're looking at the squad and they think, well, the squad is quite healthy, it's quite strong. There are more or less 2 players for each position. Therefore, the player who is currently shadowing the starting line of players will play this week. But I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I think there's a few factors which Reggie Labrie will look at. I do think that Patterson will play, but what will he do at central defence? Will he give an audition to the 2 centre halves who will play against Brentford? Now that's assuming Dan Ballard is out for a little while. Certainly, even if Dan Ballard's injury proves nothing serious, I can't see him playing. Then you're looking at the midfield. Well, it's still an embryonic midfield. I think it's fairly safe to say Lefay will start the game. But at the back, will Ronaldo move into central defence to play alongside Akitite and I pronounced that dreadfully, didn't I? Or in midfield, will Patrick Roberts come in, or will he give a Dengre a chance? Then again, who will start? Do you play Gui or Isidore through the middle? Do you play both of them, or do you give Mayenda the chance against lesser opposition to gain redemption? I think that's a fair enough expression after a dreadful miss against Burnley. Mayenda, I think, is the most fascinating individual in this Sunderland team, despite all the arrivals in the summer. I stuck him in my fantasy team. He's raw, but I noticed something about him last season. The goal at Wembley, what he's learning to do, and what a lot of strikers do, is don't try and place the ball. Look at the target, smash it. The goal against Sheffield United. He didn't try and fire the ball across the keeper. He wanted it as hard as he can, and I saw that as a positive. What Mayenda doesn't do is sniff chances. That is what all 15 plus goals a season Predators do. He is a very good player, but that was a bad miss. If you look, I think it was yesterday, Fulham against Man United, the way that Smith Rowe attacked the ball to score, it was a very similar chance. I know that it's that height, isn't it, when it's just a little bit above the comfort zone and he had to adjust his body, which he didn't do very well. So I know I'm going off on tangent here, but the jury's out on whether Mayenda is the player to score the goals for Sunderland to prosper this season. I'm still marginally on his side, saying yes, but I want to see more chances. And I, for one, certainly wouldn't complain if he was leading the line again tomorrow night. I don't think it will happen though.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I think everybody rates Mayenda and he's got that raw potential, raw talent. He is 20 years old. Top strikers do miss chances, don't they? And I remember last season, obviously, he came in for some stick. He missed against Blackburn Rovers on Boxing Day, missed against Stoke City a couple of days later. We took 1 point from those 2 games. Arguably, should have taken 6, really. But we didn't. However, it's a pertinent point that you make. He's definitely going to be one for the future. He's definitely going to be a player. You can see that, can't you? There's no doubt about it. But whilst I think he's going to contribute and he's going to be good for Sunderland this season, is he enough? Is he what Sunderland needs? Is he what is going to keep Sunderland in the division? Now you throw into that Wilson Isidore and Mark Guiu. Will that be enough? Should Sunderland be looking for another either wide forward or another striker? Because defensively, I think Sunderland are going to be fairly competent this season, but it's scoring goals, isn't it, that will keep you up?
That's right. You say good strikers miss chances, good strikers sniff chances as well. Now, I was looking at the Tolby chance in the first half at Turf Moor, and he did well, but there was no other option than to try and chip the ball over and across Dubravka. Now, just imagine if when he got possession, I think it was a super ball from Adingra, wasn't it? That to his right, he heard the unmistakable sound of Mayenda running at speed into the box, shouting, "Cross it." Do you know the point I'm making? And I looked at that, and Mayenda wasn't up with play. And it, wouldn't it have been great if Talby had simply squared the ball to a teammate who had tapped home? So that's that point. And I've forgotten what your question was. I'm rabbiting on so much, James.
I think that, well, yeah, it was a long-winded question from me. But should Sunderland look to find some more goals from somewhere before the transfer window shuts? I think it's a really, really interesting question just to see what they do with that, because obviously they brought the lad in from Chelsea. They have Isidore and Mayenda. Do we need just that little bit more?
Well, John, the other 19 Premier League clubs, don't forget Liverpool, who you'd say have plenty of firepower. They're after another striker whose name I can't quite recall.
I was going to say there's a lad at Newcastle that wants out if Sunderland fans.
I know. Yeah, I mean, listen, every man that's dog wants a proven goal scorer. I've heard a lot of good things about Gui, although, and I think you might remember this, back 2 years ago, I came into the press room at the Stadium of Light. I think it was ahead of the Southampton, the 5-0 game. And I said, a friend of mine who covers Chelsea and Fulham, he rang me up and said, "Oh, Sunderland have got a good player in Mason Burstow." So, but I was chatting to him again today, and I reminded him of that. He said, "No, we're talking." He said, "We're talking, different levels here." And he said he predicts that Gui will eventually be Sunderland's #1 starter this season. So, but we do know, because Sunderland did try and sign a goal-scoring wide man. What was it there?
Loriente, from Sassuolo.
Yeah, that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Mundell was fit at the time. So not only did he not come in, but Mundell, he thought Labrie thought he would have 2 players for that position. Now what he's using is Adingra and Tolby, who I think possibly were brought in to compete against each other. So yes, I do think something could do with another player to score goals, probably a wide player, and all of a sudden the name Diallo Amad Diallo is cropping up. He didn't start for Man United the first game, and yesterday he was taken off, I think, after 52 minutes. He's playing out of position, and he didn't play particularly well yesterday. Now, I'm not saying it's it's going to happen. It's what a lot of Sunderland fans dream about. But funny things do happen in football, and there's going to be a lot of shocks and surprises in the next 7 days.
I think it's criminally, and I watched that game yesterday that he's playing right wing back in a back five. I think, just to go off on a tangent a little bit, but I can't see that formation ever working at Manchester United, and playing Diallo there just it makes no sense to me. He can't be happy with that, given what we know about and what we saw from him when he was at Sunderland. That free flow and elegance in attack, who was given a free role really by Tony Mowbray, wasn't he? He must be sat there thinking, God, this is miserable.
Well, you do wonder, because it's pretty clear now that Manchester United will stick with the three at the back. So really, the only position open to him is that wing-back slot, which, as you correctly say, isn't his forte.
I always think, why buy a Ferrari if you're going to drive it like a Fiat Punto? You know what I mean? That's how I feel with Ahmad at the moment. I'll just run through quickly.
I'm one of these drivers who drives a Fiat Punto and tries to drive it like a Ferrari.
I'll quickly run through my predicted 11 for the Huddersfield game tomorrow night. I think Patterson will go in goal, as you say, Ian. I think we might see minutes for Huggins. Masuaku left back. I think we'll see the lad from PSG come in, Mukalele. A lot of people have got Jensen Sealt in their predicted 11s. I actually think he'll bring in Zach Johnson. I think he'll give some minutes to him ahead of his exit at some point, and I think everybody else will be rested in that defensive line. Neil Rigard-Lefay, I think, in the middle. I think Roberts will go right wing. I think you could see Isidore left wing, and then Mark Guiu up front. And it's a bit of an opportunity for the likes of Guiu and Isidore, isn't it? Because, you know, if either of them scores a couple of goals and looks really good, then all of a sudden the chat coming into the Brentford game shifts towards whether they should be starting or not.
Oh, yeah, listen, there's so many questions before the game, and there will be questions that remain after the game, whatever the outcome. I was at the final friendly against Rayo Vallecano, and as you remember, you know, one squad was dispatched to Germany to play quite impressively against Augsburg. The other squad were on duty 24 hours later, and they lost quite comprehensively to an impressive Spanish side. Dan Neil that day was probably Sunderland's best performer by some distance, and I'm sure tomorrow his pride will be hurt, his determination will be fueled, and his passion for Sunderland will come out, and I've got no doubt whatsoever he will play well. As I said earlier, we do wonder, will it be a case of giving players a game because they haven't played yet? Will he try and develop some combinations? What I do know is that sentiment won't come into Labry's equation whatsoever. And I'm going to just bring you back a few years, shows how long I've been doing this job. And the story, I mentioned that when I was giving a talk at Sunderland Senior Supporters Club in Queenie's before the season started. And I remember in 1990, Dennis Smith's Sunderland side, which of course, if you recall, went up because of Swindon's misdemeanors. Anyway, Kevin Ball had been one of the main signings, and he had quite a difficult pre-season game against Torpedo Moscow. And that must have shaped Dennis Smith's selection. Sunderland's first game was at Norwich City, and he played John McPhail alongside Gary Bennett. Now, some of that was because it was still taking Kevin Ball, who subsequently, of course, became a legend at the club, but it took him a little while to settle. But sentiment came into it. John McPhail had been at with Dennis at York City. He played a prominent part in Sunderland getting promotion from third tier to second tier. I think, astonishingly, I think he scored 16, 17 goals. He was a penalty taker. And he did well in the season when Sunderland went up through the playoffs. So I do think there was a little bit of emotion, a little bit of sentiment in that decision. Dennis Smith said he's been a great servant. He deserves at least one top flight appearance in his career. Sunderland played well, lost 3-2. McPhail, I don't think, played for the club again. Kevin Ball came in, and I think he was player of the year. Sidetracking a bit, but that is how much football has changed now. Nothing like that will even enter the breed's mind. You know, this is about balancing game time with forming partnerships with getting the result that he wants.
That leads me nicely to me next question, and I promise there's a point coming after this question, Ian. But how many years now have you been on the beat writing about North East football? If you don't mind me asking.
Well, no grey hair, and I've still got my own teeth. And some people would say I've still got the same hairstyle as when I first started. This is my 40th season. Now, I think it's 40 years next August since my first game. I think the Sunderland Echo out of the main regional establishments is the only one I didn't work for. I had a short 6 months at the Shields Gazette, and all I was doing there, it was a small desk, and I would fill in when people were on holiday. And so at the beginning of the season, I covered at Newcastle at home to Liverpool, Newcastle away to Tottenham. And then I remember covering a couple of Sunderland games when Laurie McMenamin was in charge. And I can remember, I was, listening. My ears were burning. I was scared to say something. At that time, it was almost outright war between him and the media. When I went to the Northern Echo, I covered the lower division clubs, Darlington, Hartlepool, Scarborough, York. Again, filled in now and again for people on holiday. So, for instance, at the start of the 89-90 season, I was at Swindon when Sunderland won. And then I moved to the Chronicle, and I covered Sunderland outright for 5 years. A lot of that was for professional reasons. It was also because I was living in Newcastle and I was getting married. I actually left the Northern Echo 2 days before I got married. And so my first game covering Sunderland on a regular basis is older viewers, listeners of yours, readers will remember this is one of their favourite games. It was Sunderland 4, West Ham 3. The Kieran Brady game, which it became known as. I'm quite friendly with Kieran because obviously we're both Celtic fans. And I remember that after that game, seeking out Liam Brady, who was a hero of mine because I followed Republic of Ireland football. And anyway, I remember getting an interview, Brady on Brady. So that was a great time. And of course, a few weeks later, Sunderland beat Newcastle in the playoffs. Then they went up. And that season, 1991, which I think's forgotten by some people, Sunderland played some of the most amazing football I've seen in the first half of the season before gradually, entering the relegation quagmire. Anyway, so then 95, I moved to the Journal and covered Newcastle, Sunderland and Middlesbrough. Some of my happiest times because all three clubs were on the rise at the time. You had Keegan's Entertainers, Kenny Dalglish, Bobby Robson. You had Peter Reid, Quinn, Phillips, promotion, moved to the Stadium of Light. And then you had Middlesbrough, Robson, Juninho, Ravanelli, Emerson. So I had a season ticket for Wembley. I went down so much in those days. And then
you've got a very poor record at Wembley, though, I understand, Ian.
Absolutely dreadful. My middle name is Jonah. and that my reputation was reinforced by the fact that jumping a few years, decades down the line, I turned freelance in 2020. So that meant I didn't tend to go to games outside the area. So I tend to cover games within the Northeast. But anyway, I remember I moved to the Daily Star at the turn of the millennium. The one game that I never covered because I was in between jobs, I left the Journal on the Friday and started at the Start on the Monday. So I had no game to cover, but I went to the Stadium Light and saw Sunderland demolish Chelsea 4-1 in what a lot of people would still say was the best performance I've ever seen. Certainly the best 45 minutes I've ever seen from a Sunderland side. So yeah, so Daily Star, then Daily Star and Daily Express. Daily Express, when Reach took over, Daily Mirror as well covered. I used to cover I covered Wimbledon for 15 years, loved that. Republic of Ireland football, and then 2017, the Sports Centre, who was a very good friend of mine, he said, "Do you want the bad news or the good news?" I said, "I'll have the bad news." He said, "You're not covering Wimbledon this year." And I said, But what's the good news? He said, I want you to go to the World Cup. I want you on the England beat. And I said, is that good news? And actually it was. England, it was called the impossible job for the managers, but it's also when the likes of Capello were in charge, it was a miserable experience at the time for the journalists.
I can imagine.
But suddenly, Gareth Southgate was in charge, who I knew from his Middlesbrough days, got on very well with him. I was welcomed into the pack very well. I had 3 very happy years. Not 3, about 2.5 happy years covering England. The 7 weeks I spent in Russia was an experience of a lifetime. So, and then, as I say, since then, my traveling has gone down from something like 25 flights a year to just my family holiday flights.
Fantastic. The question I was going to get to, all of that experience you've got, Ian, over the years, all of the football seasons, you talked about Dennis Smith in the 90s, all of your experience covering Newcastle and the Premier League, Middlesbrough, England. How does this season feel to you from a Sunderland perspective? How do you think it'll go?
I can't recall the feel-good factor being so strong on Wearside and its surrounding areas, because let's not forget, Sunderland not a city team, they're a regional team, even beyond region as well. The fans are in a good place. When you see those fans in marks out of 10, how would you mark your manager? How would you mark your owner? I think they'll both be 10 out of 10 at the minute. I think the 2 most important qualities that a football club needs to possess are identity and connectivity. Now, they got that when Mowbray was in charge. They lost it under Beale, and to a certain extent when Mike Dodds was in interim charge. They've got it back. Sunderland will always be Sunderland AFC, but let's face it, they're Sunderland United at the moment, aren't they? You feel everyone is at one. Everyone is on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet. Of course, it's going to be hard. When I saw a lot of pundits putting Sunderland 20th, 19th, 18th, there was that part of me which thought, that's lazy. You haven't done your homework, because you look at the recruitment and you can make a logical argument for every single player who's come to the club. This isn't scattergun. This was very surgical reinforcements. Having said that, I am, how should I put this? Yeah, I'm slightly less confident now than I was on Saturday morning. We
all lurch from result to result in this business, don't we? We just lurch from high to low.
Yeah, and listen, there will be whether you've got Leeds connections, maybe 24 hours time Newcastle connections or Liverpool connections. Their moods, the feel-good factor within them will be determined by what happens tonight. I haven't answered your question. I do think Sunderland will stay up. I do think that there is this momentum. I know I started off by saying, is this a spike balloon or is this momentum stalled? I don't think momentum's stalled. I think Sunderland will beat Brentford on Saturday. If the fans can do half as good a job as they did last Saturday, then there really will be a 12th minor game. So yes, the confidence is still in place, even if it's ever so slightly diluted.
Maybe a bit of blind optimism here from myself, Ian, but obviously Leeds have won. I know they got hammered off Arsenal the week after, but Sunderland have won, Burnley have won. I don't think that happened until, was it October last season? We know that
I think the first one, yeah.
The 2 latest, in the past 2 Premier League seasons, we know all 3 teams have gone down each season. But again, maybe this is me being a complete blind optimist, maybe a bit naive to the beat of the Premier League as well, with having been in the League One and the Championship for so long. But it does feel like there's a chance this season, actually, that it won't be the 3 promoted teams going down again. And that gives me a little bit of hope. I'm not saying all 3 will survive, but just judging by West Ham, maybe Wolves as well. Brentford, I know, got a good win, but it seems to me like there could be a little bit of movement this season.
I think it was a coincidence that the 3 teams who went down last 2 seasons with the three who come up the previous year. Now, that's not to underestimate the chasm between the leagues. It's looking at each individual case. Let's take last season. Ipswich recruitment drive was misguided. Kieran McKenna, good manager, but he and his recruitment team thought, if we can sign the best players in the Championship, Jack Clark be one, then that will see us survive. Now, that proved patently wrong. Leicester was a club which, the title of 2016 seemed a million years away. They are a club where I understand that there's a power struggle. There's behind the scenes, all is not right. And has been proved countless times when a club has those problems, what happens off the pitch, it tends to erode what happens on the pitch. Southampton, well, I'm not just saying this as a Celtic fan, but I think Russell Martin isn't proving the great manager that he thinks he is. One of the most ridiculous strategies I've ever seen in the Premier League was Southampton last season refusing to compromise the style, playing from the back and being time and time again caught out. So,
it's so pretentious to do that, in my opinion, Ian. It's so I just think it's ridiculous. Give me. Don't get me wrong. I love an idealist like a Brian Clough. Yes. But give me a cold, hard pragmatist any day of the week to keep you in a league.
Well, I think what Sunderland have got is a cold-hearted pragmatist. Quite likable, despite his cold heart. I like the piece.
Yeah, I do as well.
Its smile certainly isn't cold, but so you look at those teams. Even the previous year, let's face it, Luton, who are now playing third-tier football, they were out of the 6 teams who've gone down the past years. Luton were the ones who came closest to survival. So it's when we are not talking mission impossible. What we've had this season, we probably, of course, Manchester United and Tottenham won't be down at the bottom, and Everton I don't think will be either. But you have got certain teams which do appear on the decline, i.e. West Ham. You've got another team in Wolves who've lost their best players. I would have said Fulham because I haven't recruited, but they looked pretty good yesterday. But certainly
they did well last night.
Certainly those two teams, and Brentford, of course, who are in a mess despite the win on Saturday, which is very impressive. Incidentally, Keith Andrew once came very, very close to joining Sunderland.
Oh, did he? I never knew that.
Yeah, but if they lose Wissa, which I think they will this week, and Mbemo, that's a huge loss. I did see, I've read 2 or 3 reports saying that Jordan Henderson had a very, very good game. And although you didn't see him a lot on the ball on Match of the Day, what you could see was in the background was him barking out orders. So it's still the same Jordan Henderson.
I guess, though, that's the thing, though, isn't it? From a Sunderland point of view, Ian, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it? It feels like there's a glimmer, and we've been here before where it's, I'm not saying the season's going to end like this, but it can all end in tears, can't it? Despite the early season optimism. Listen,
Sunderland have one of the best fanzines in the country. Thank goodness, Love Supreme is still published in print form, but it's won a lot of awards. But one award it won't win is the best ever titled Sunderland fanzine. That was won back in the 90s. It's a hope I can't stand, which just was the purest title for a fanzine.
No, absolutely. Well, Ian, thank you for joining us. It's been like old times sat in a classroom at Sunderland University. We actually had Conor Bromley on last week, and we were saying off camera that we miss Ian Murtagh
as well. No, yeah. I know it was only during a one term, and I'd only been once a week, but I loved it, and it's absolutely fantastic seeing you doing so well at Sunderland Echo, seeing Conor doing so well, and a lot of the others. It's a fine institution, Sunderland University. Don't just say that. My brother's now a non-executive director on the board. And,
is he?
Yeah. So that's another reason for liking the university. So you carry on doing the good work, and see if you can make 40 years.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. Thanks for that. We had good teachers. Me and Connor were saying that we miss Ian Murtagh's sports quizzes on. I think it was Thursday afternoons. They were good fun.
I used to love doing them, and here I go again going off tangent, but it's something. It made me feel old in the sense that a few people wanted questions on combat sports, which I knew nothing about. American football, which I know little about, and yet people didn't have a clue about golf and cricket. And then I also remember when the Cheltenham Festival was on, and I'd always give you my tips. Now, I got into horse racing when I moved into sports journalism at the age of 21, 22, and all the guys I looked up to, names like Bob Cass and the like, and Cheltenham Festival was the sporting paradise, and I got into it then. But I couldn't persuade any of you lot to put a fiver on my tips just as well.
That brings back a memory to me. Actually, I remember having an absolutely cracking class debate on the morality of boxing versus horse racing. You were arguing that boxing is in a sense a little bit immoral and it should be banned, but horse racing was okay. And we were having this back and forth, and I think we were all just stirring up the pot. But it was a good debate actually. In the end, I enjoyed it.
I had a friend at university who boxed and suffered a bit of brain damage. So my opinions were very much shaped by that experience.
No, absolutely. Well, Ian, thank you for joining us. It's been great. What's your prediction? Actually, we'll go for a Huddersfield Town prediction, and we'll go for a Brentford prediction as well. Why not?
Right, 2-0, 2-0.
Brilliant. Both to Sunderland, I'm guessing.
Both to Sunderland.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you very much, Ian. If you want to hear about the Huddersfield Town and Brentford games, you can head over to the Sunderland Echo website. We'll have you fully covered. I believe Phil's at the press conference today on Monday as we're recording. So we'll bring you all of the latest injury news, hopefully some positive news on Dan Ballard. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will catch you next time.